Well, Borodar, good morning. Pleased to see you on. You'll have to excuse my cold, which is not very a cold wind and a spending review don't come together very carefully for me, but I'm really pleased to be here. Good morning. Thank you very much for the welcome and introductions from Iolo and indeed from John. I think as a recently appointed honorary member of CIPFA, I'm very pleased to be here today, but also I join my friend and colleague John Swinney, who Minister for Finance and Deputy First Minister for Scotland, who's also an honorary member as well. And I really want to acknowledge the importance of CIPFA. And I mean, yesterday, of course, I said to Jeff Andrews, a CIPFA member, my specialist advisor, where's the CIPFA briefing? And here it is. Osborne scraps tax credit cuts, but Whitehall spending down by 1/5. And I knew we could rely on the CIPFA briefing straight away. I obviously want to start by saying a few words about the current financial context that we're all working in, the challenging times we have faced and are continue to face. Despite the UK government's continuing austerity programme, the Welsh Government has done and will continue to do all it can to protect public services. And you've responded by continuing to deliver high quality services, supporting our communities, playing your part in helping to revive our economy. And coming out of the recession, Wales has done remarkably well. Our employment rate has increased strongly, inactivity declined more sharply than any other part of the UK or regions. The unemployment rate is now 6.2% and the number unemployed is 7,000 lower than it was a year ago. But since devolution, the employment rate has increased by 4.6% in Wales, more than double that across the UK as a whole. Inactivity rates are showing similar improvement. Gross value added per head has improved considerably since devolution, and Welsh performance on household incomes over the period since devolution outperformed the UK as a whole. But despite this improving picture, the UK government has yet again chosen the path of further cuts, and the spending review announcement yesterday will make our efforts to maintain this momentum even more difficult. And despite the fanfare around the high-profile announcements, the underlying message for Wales was that we are facing an overall real terms cut to our budget of 3.6% by 2019-20. And the spending review is yet another example of the UK government's sleight of hand approach to fiscal management, seemingly giving with one hand but taking away far more with the other. The Chancellor proudly announced that we are in this together, a statement that sounds pretty hollow to the millions of people on low incomes and benefits across the UK who will be deprived of a further 12 billion on top of the cuts already imposed over the past 5 years. And in Wales, we'll do all we can to continue to lift our people out of poverty by supporting the economy to create well-paid, sustainable jobs, by providing people with the skills that they need to find work, helping them to help themselves, not punishing them for the failure of a policy of fiscal austerity by the UK government, which has resulted in the weakest economic recovery on record. We'll also do all we can to protect public services, an area again that the UK government seemingly also believes should be punished for policy failure. But since 2010, the UK government has 15% cut in public sector employment. And this can't continue without further impacting on the provision of services to the most vulnerable. But I was pleased to see that the UK government has listened to our calls to boost capital investment. A boost to infrastructure investment has to be welcomed. Over the next few days, we'll be going through the announcement in detail to determine the full impact of this announcement in Wales, but I can guarantee that there will be little to cheer. But it falls on us now to manage a further period of financial constraint and deliver our priorities within a budget that continues to reduce in real terms. The draft budget, which we will publish, are published on the 8th of December, and the following day's provisional local government settlement will show how we will achieve this. But the Welsh Government is using every lever at its disposal to offset the impact of these severe cuts. If we look back in 2014 alone, I committed to around 1.9 billion of new innovative investment to support the priorities set out in the Wales Infrastructure Investment Plan. And alongside an MPD pipeline with a capital value of £1 billion, I announced a £250 million extension of the Housing Finance Grant, tripling the size of the scheme that I launched in September 2013. I also announced an innovative £150 million flood and coastal defence programme planned to be operational from 2018. And these announcements are in addition to our intention to make full use of the £500 million of direct borrowing that Wales will be able to undertake as a result of provisions in the 2014 Wales Act. And John talked about innovation. In fact, again, worked very closely with Scottish colleagues in the Scottish Futures Trust and Scottish Government to progress in terms of the innovative investment. Around 350 million of investment in our highways and in the 21st Century Schools programme through the innovative local government borrowing initiative, and a 4 million annual funding stream for the Housing Finance Grant. That's an initiative which has seen 19 RSLs raise 125 million of new funding to finance delivery of around 1,000 affordable homes. So if we consider this alongside the value of the innovative finance schemes that I announced last year, our operational schemes increase the value of our innovative finance portfolio to around 2.4 billion. Procurement is another key area for innovation. The new public contract regulations came into place this year and provide us with new and innovative tools to maximise economic development through procurement. For the first time, the principle of proportionality is built into law, helping to reduce bureaucracy and speed up the procurement process. We'll also be able to regulate for the first time to reinforce the guidance we've already issued in the community benefits and employment practices fields. The National Procurement Service is now well established to focus on repetitive spend and buying once for Wales. And this all-Wales collaborative approach is providing cashable savings for organisations across Wales. And Wales has also benefited more than any other nation or region in the UK from EU funding. And that's one of the reasons why continued membership of the EU and maximising EU funding opportunities for Wales remains a key priority of this government. As a pro-business and pro-European government, EU funds are vital to our economic security, prosperity and well-being. They provide significant investment opportunities, stimulate growth and jobs when aligned with our economic and spatial priorities. And since 2014-20 Structural Funds Programme were launched a year ago, we've already announced EU investments worth 410 million across Wales, including funding for apprenticeships and traineeships, the Welsh Government's Sir Cymru 2 project and Aberystwyth University's Innovation and Enterprise Campus. So I remain committed to ensuring that Wales makes the most of all available EU investment opportunities, including funding provided by the European Investment Bank and the European Fund for Strategic Investments, EFSI. We've already seen a 60 million investment from EIB, complementing EU and Welsh Government funds to help develop the new world-class Swansea University Bay campus. And we'll continue to engage with key private sector funders, including the EIB, to secure further financial investments for Wales. I've talked about the Wales Act. Well, the Wales Act 2014 provides for the devolution of a range of new tax and borrowing powers, the first of which are due to be implemented from April 2018. And together with full devolution of stamp duty, land tax and landfill tax, we will be able to create new devolved taxes subject to the agreement of the National Assembly and both Houses of Parliament. The Act also provides for the future introduction of a Welsh rate of income tax. However, this is not a viable option for Wales, while our long-running concerns remain over the Barnett formula, as this creates huge uncertainties about the future funding of Welsh public services. I mean, the UK government had committed to address this in yesterday's spending review, but instead what we got was a temporary fix which leaves continuing doubts about our long-term funding. These are not the circumstances in which to bring forward plans for a Welsh rate of income tax. But in the meantime, work is progressing on the taxes already agreed for devolution. I've introduced to the Assembly the first Welsh tax legislation in almost 800 years, the Tax Collection and Management Wales Bill, establishing the Welsh Revenue Authority. And further legislation introducing the new Welsh taxes to replace stamp duty, land tax and landfill tax are due to follow after the Assembly elections in 2016. Alongside these developments, April saw the full devolution in Wales to Wales of non-domestic rates, putting Wales on an equal basis with Scotland and giving Welsh ministers new flexibilities to use this important economic lever. But turning again to the central theme of your conference, improving performance and innovation, I'm sure that some of you today will have attended the Public Services Summit earlier this month and would have heard the First Minister and the Minister for Public Services talking about the concept of a one public service culture in Wales. I'm not going to replay what was said at the summit, but I do want to discuss the new approaches the Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act will bring, as Yola mentioned. And this Act puts in place a radically new approach to how we in the public sector make decisions, and it will be a game changer. For the first time, the Act gives a legally binding common purpose, the wellbeing goals for the public service in Wales. It details the principle by which we should work together to deliver the long-term well-being of Wales for both current and future generations. And this will mean collective action as well as individual responsibility. It gives us a platform from which to tackle the long-term challenges facing our communities, not the short-termism, the long-term challenges, including the effects of poverty, health inequalities and an ageing population. We're in the process of preparing for the Act when it comes into force next year, and recently we published a consultation on how do you measure a nation's progress. And these are our proposals for 40 indicators for the future to measure whether we are achieving the 7 goals of the Act. Public bodies must work to achieve all of the proposed 7 goals, not just 1 or 2. So I do encourage you to feed into the consultation process. To achieve these 7 goals, we need to consider the issue of improving performance against effectiveness. It's difficult to separate performance from effectiveness, yet it's all too easy to merge the two. Whilst delivering well against objectives, targets and milestones and improving this over time would represent good performance, the service or initiative being delivered may itself be ineffective. Effectiveness would be measured by the outcomes produced through the intervention, which may not be in line with what was needed or expected. So improving performance is indeed not just about the numbers. Performance information needs to be seen alongside evidence of effectiveness and impact, which can take many different forms. It's the qualitative evidence, sometimes viewed wrongly as soft evidence, which often gives us the explanations for cause and effect and helps us to contextualise performance. Not enough emphasis is put on gathering and analysing this sort of evidence in a structured way. I've always placed particularly high value on robust evaluation. I'm currently developing a more strategic, more structured approach to evaluation across the Welsh Government, so that in future we'll have a stronger connections between evaluation and policy design and be better equipped to take account of evaluation findings for better or for worse. Getting better at understanding impact should be an integral part of any strategy for improving performance. Recognising the financial pressures we face, it may not be realistic to invest in significant time and money in building the understanding right now, but there are some practical steps which could help greatly. For example, designing monitoring systems around evidence needs to ensure the right information is available to assess performance and effectiveness in parallel. To take opportunities to experiment and test on a limited scale. To use tools to understand what drives outcomes and how public service performance affects them. And making the most of evidence from elsewhere which can help us judge effectiveness. So the Welsh Government is engaged with CIPFA and a number of you in Wales on the integrated reporting pilot to improve the links between expenditure and outcomes. Cost adds another dimension to this. Cost is an important but often evasive element in the effectiveness equation. For all the many questions asked about the transfer and scaling up of good practice, a firm grasp of costs is something we often lack. And this is particularly true of multi-agency working, where it's often not clear how costs and performances are shared between partners. So finally, as I reach the 6th anniversary of being a finance minister in Wales, I would like to thank CIPFA once more for their engagement and support throughout my term. Without your expertise, we wouldn't be in the position whereby we have been able to balance the books and come in at the end of every year with a tiny underspend, every Welsh pound used wisely. And I hope that's given you today, my contribution, and indeed following on from Iolo and John, given you a feel for the challenges and ahead, and also some ideas to consider during your discussion around improving performance. I wish you well with the remainder of your conference.